And reason, which is that law, teaches all mankind who will but consult it, that being all, that's the law of nature, according to Locke and Jefferson. So, you put them all together and you find out what is freedom. It is our natural right to do whatever we please and run our lives as we see fit, as long as we don't harm another person. The so-called non-aggression principle from the 1970s onward that the libertarians use as their fundamental principle is actually the definition of liberty itself, if you believe Thomas Jefferson. If you're standing with Alexander Hamilton, who said that the national debt is a national blessing, then you probably wouldn't be here because everything's going great. Never been more blessed than we are right now. But Hamilton was informed by a completely different philosophy. And without getting into it, they both talked about this. So if you believe in the land of the free and the inalienable rights that you never give up, not only can they not be taken away by anybody else, you can't even give them away. That's what inalienable means. So we can't get together and pass a law that gives away our natural liberty. We don't even have the right to do that ourselves. That is a pretty radical idea. And just to make sure that there was no misunderstanding about that, Locke in his essay later said about the power of the legislature. Now, to cut through a lot of, this and that and say he believed in an elected assembly to pass the laws that would govern the community, just like we have today. But that elected assembly, just because the majority elected them, couldn't pass any law they wanted. So what's the limit? First, I'm quoting, "It is not, nor can possibly be absolutely arbitrary over the lives and portions of the people." This is the legislative power. "For it being but the joint power of every member of the society, given up to that person or assembly which is the legislator, it can be no more than those persons had in a state of nature before they entered into the society, and gave up to the community that power. And having in the state of nature no arbitrary power over the life, liberty, or possession of another, but only so much as the law of nature gave him for the preservation of himself and the rest of mankind, this is all he doth or can give up to the Commonwealth, and by it to the legislative power, so that the legislative can have no more than this." I know that's 1690 English, but it's quite startling. The legislature can have no more power, even if 99% of the people try to give it to them, than any one of us individuals has naturally over another human being. Because when we pass a law, there aren't any voluntary laws. They're all mandatory, and they're all backed up ultimately by force or the threat of violence. I mean, even a speeding ticket, if you don't show up for court, they're going to come get you. And if you resist, they're going to overpower you. And if you resist too much, you're going to get your name in the paper in the wrong section. That's how the law works. And so when can we, that's an awesome power. The power to compel people to do something with their life at stake if they don't. When do we have a right to exercise power like that? At the same time we have a right to exercise that power as individuals in the face of aggression being committed against us, and at no other time. So if we're looking for the founding American principle, what is a good law and what is a bad law? A good law is one that prohibits aggression against somebody else. Every other law would be unjust according to this thinking. Now, I'm not going to rely on that one passage to say this was Jefferson's philosophy. He said in 1816, "Our legislators are not sufficiently apprised of the rightful limits of their powers, that their true office is to declare and enforce only our natural rights and duties, and to take none of them from us. No man has a natural right to commit aggression on the equal rights of another, and this is all from which the laws ought to restrain him. Pretty clear. On religious freedom, he said, but rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within the limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. I do not add within the limits of the law, because law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the right of an individual. That actually wasn't on religious freedom. I'm starting to have to read like this these days, I'm sorry. That was another expression of the non-aggression principle. And on religious freedom, he actually said, the legitimate powers of government extend to such acts only as those that are injurious to others. But it does me no injury for my neighbor to say there are 20 gods or no God. It neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg. Now, if you go through the big thick book of Jefferson's letters and writings and fan the pages and stick your finger anywhere, you will find him regurgitating the non-aggression principle over and over. This is the founding principle of our nation. This is what he had in mind when he said the purpose of government is to secure these rights. Period. That's it. Even the U.S. Constitution says more than that. It says some good things to secure the blessings of liberty. It also talks about promoting something called the general welfare, which Madison and Jefferson had their interpretation of what that meant, and I believe the right one. However, I'd rather not have those words and argue over it all, because the other side have used them quite to our detriment. I think you'd all agree. And I also want to say that we've got a section of amendments to the Constitution that are, I think, misaptly called the Bill of Rights, because what they really are is a bill of protections of some of our rights. But those are not a list of our rights. In fact, those are kind of the last resort. If the government becomes so bad that they're actually threatening these, then it's time, as he says, to throw off such government and institute new guards for our future security. So let me get back to the first question about the health care bill. So what's wrong with it? You know, the problem, obviously, is not that people are going to get health care, even if it allows some people to get it for free. That doesn't bother me. It's not the people getting the health care that we object to. It's the people being taken from without their consent, without any power of government even delegated by the majority, which is, again, flimsy excuse to exercise power. That's what we object to. And Jefferson spoke about this, about the redistribution of wealth, specifically. He said, and he was doing an introduction on a political treatise here, and he was talking specifically about the section on taxation by a French economist. He said, to take from one, because it is thought that his own industry and that of his father's has acquired too much, in order to spare to others who or whose fathers have not exercised equal industry and skill, is to violate arbitrarily the first principle of association, the guarantee to everyone of a free exercise of his industry and the fruits acquired by it. A basic right, the very first right of association. And this goes back to the John Locke statement that everyone has a right not to have aggression commenced against them, including against their possessions, to have force applied to them, to give up their property and let someone use it themselves or give it to somebody else or whatever they say they're going to do with it. And that includes the government. Since we don't have a